Well, hey there, sweet peas. Welcome back to Friendless. I'm your host, James Avramenko, and this week is part 2 of my interview with the one and only Scott Hendrickson. We pick up where we left off talking about who deserves second chances and how to give them, how to forgive yourself and your friends, and the importance of chosen family. This is probably one of the most emotional hours I have recorded in the history of this show, and I could not be prouder to share it with you. So lean back, get comfy, set your volume at a reasonable level, and enjoy part 2 of my interview with Scott Hendrickson here on Friendless.
All right. So I was thinking about some different, questions that I could ask you, and one that sort of felt relevant to us, and that I think is an important question that we're always asking around friendships and relationships is it. And so I'm just curious about your thoughts on this. Like, what do you think about second chances, and what do you think about forgiveness?
I oscillate in it. I think so much of it is context-based. And at the same time, too, I think I could probably count on one hand and have fingers left over the number of people I consider, like, permanently forever out of my life. Because I believe in forgiveness, and I believe in grace, and I believe in understanding. And I think that it's really important that people be given more than second chances. I think they be given as many chances as they need. People don't learn at the same rate as you. You talked about it earlier about this idea of like friends, people in general aren't where you are. I've started seeing. I talked about this in a recent interview. I've started seeing friendships as like you're on your path, and you're just walking your path, and every once in a while somebody's path comes closer to yours. And you're still not walking the same path. You're both on your own, but you're walking, the paths are closer, and then sometimes it spins away. And to me, I would accept anyone back into my life who has wronged me, who I've wronged, under the proviso that they demonstrate behavioral changes. I'm no longer interested in what people say. This is, coming back to what I was talking about. Like, I'm not interested in being told apologies. I'm interested in being shown apologies.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Really recently, like in December, I got, what they, I don't know if it's a clinical term. I don't know if it what it is, but I see it on the internet. I got hoovered, by my ex, and I was told all the things that I needed to hear, and I was lured in, and I got used, and then I got discarded, and I was blamed for it all, and I was then vilified, and this huge, really, really intense smear campaign came out of it, and what's funny is that, like, I forgive them, like, because it's not worth hanging on to that. And it's also like it's not beneficial for me to maintain the anger.
That's right.
I've felt that anger. I've sat with it, and I continue to sit with it. Even just thinking about it now, I get angry. I think about the connections I lost because of it. I think about the lies that were told about. And I get another wave of anger. And at the same time, too, I learned. Right. And something through my therapy that I'm doing a lot of focus on is this idea of like, there's no such thing as a mistake. There's learning opportunities. You make a choice based on the information you have at that time. And you choose whatever it is you choose. And then the repercussions happen. And when that scenario happens the next time, you now have new information to make a new choice. Right. And so, say that were to happen again, I wouldn't rely on words anymore, That doesn't make this person a bad person, So much of their behavior is instinctual, right? So much of it is just, their own coping mechanisms, their own processes, their own protective instincts for themselves.
Yeah, very
right?
lucky are you getting the brand new or the innovative version. You're mostly getting the habitual or
Bingo.
the instinctual
Exactly.
version of someone. And
Exactly.
you can always leave room for that trailblazer,
Exactly.
that innovator, that new version to show up. But it may not happen.
That's just it. And what I've learned is to just stop waiting for it, right? Because that's what was keeping me in those cycles was getting glimpses of who I thought they were and then who they really were being shown to me, right?
Right.
And so, I'm not pursuing anymore, and at the same time too, like if actual behavioral changes were demonstrated and they had a desire to be in my life, like, yeah, of course I would forgive them,
Yeah.
I think the ship has sailed of, romantic, but I don't think there's anyone on this earth who is beyond unconditional love and unconditional forgiveness, but they have to give that to themselves first. And that's where conflict comes in, is that they're looking, or myself, I'm looking for forgiveness from others before I've forgiven myself,
Yeah, I mean, it's a really cornering question that I've asked.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, do you have a good heart?
Yeah.
Are you going to hold on to things? And that's not. And I think there's maybe
it's like a yes and no, right?
Yeah, I think there's maybe something that you kind of slid past there, and that's like that they're different, right? Forgiveness and second chances are very different things.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a conversation that we have in my friend group. I have a friend, Trey, who really doesn't like apologies. His thing is like, okay, what would you do differently?
Bingo.
And it's like, I don't want an apology. I want a corrective action.
Exactly.
Right. And I think it's a really interesting concept, which I don't always agree with, because it's fascinating where I can make a mistake or I can do something wrong and I can say sorry for it and I can be sorry. But then when the question comes up, well, what would you do differently? I don't have a particular answer, right?
Sure.
Where I can say like, well, given the information that I had and what had happened, and like I would do what I did again.
Sure.
And then it's like, okay, well then how can you be sorry for it?
Yeah.
If you say you would do the same thing again.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I don't want to perpetuate this behavior forever, but other factors also need to change in order for me to show up to that situation differently. Doesn't mean like, so I think sometimes we like expect a lot of people when it comes to that sort of thing. And I think it's important to like continue to improve. And if you are going to forgive someone, one, I think you should. I think you should forgive everyone. I think that the funny thing is that forgiveness is something you give yourself.
I was gonna say the first person to forgive is always yourself. Like always. And if you haven't forgiven yourself and like authentically forgiven, not like yeah it's fine. Like if you haven't sat with it and genuinely let yourself off the hook first, there's no way to forgive someone else.
Well, and they don't even really ever need to hear it.
Exactly.
Is the reality of the situation is that anything that you're hanging on to is yours. It's yours
Exactly.
to hang on to.
Yep.
It's yours to process. They're not processing it the same way. They may not even know that you're holding some grudge or that you haven't forgiven them. They may not even know that they are requiring forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's really important when you're looking at people, we talked about this earlier. It's everyone's first time through the chute, so people are going to make some major blunders along the way.
Yep.
And you are too. And as you continue to forgive yourself, you're going to find the courage to try again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's also super important.
Yeah.
It's the other aspect about second chances is it's a little trickier, right? It's like I want them to have second chances, but maybe not with me.
That's exactly it, right? Yeah.
You
and
know?
that's what I mean by like, I'll give anyone as many chances as they need, but I'm not always going to show up every time in the same way,
Yeah.
and especially like if it's someone who's done genuine damage, like I'm not going to show up as engaged as I was the first time, and I'm not going to lean in as much as I did the first time, right? And it's every time is going to be harder and harder to convince me to lean back in, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll give them as much grace as they ended the last time, and then if I see actual change, then maybe we'll talk.
Well, that's a unique thing about like this world where we're learning about what boundaries are, right? Which were not something that anyone had 40, 50 years ago.
No.
And now kind of beginning with our generation, you're like trying to develop boundaries around what you find acceptable and where you need to protect yourself. And then, that changes the way that you're going to show up the next time. And you hope that you can do it in a way where you're continuing to show up unarmored and authentic, and that you're not so beat up that you have to show up kind of resisting the experience. The reason that I asked the question though is not, I noticed you kind of went towards one of your ex relationships as thinking about like there's someone I'd have a real hard time giving a second chance to, or not like this. But I bring it up in the context of our own relationship.
Yeah.
Because, I think we've had a lot of second chances in our relationship. I think we've offered each other a lot of forgiveness. And I think that the net result of that is that this is probably the most mature, mutually beneficial version of our relationship that we've ever had.
I agree. Yeah.
And I think, forgiveness and second chances in the context of friendship is uniquely different than the context of any other type of relationship.
Sure.
Almost any other type of relationship. Because like if it happens with your romantic partner, there's a lot of other stuff that's happening there that like makes a second chance a lot more challenging. I think one of the most unique and beautiful things about a friendship is that you really can start anew. And that's not something that you can do in a relationship. You can say, babe, it's gonna be different this time. I'm gonna love you right. You could pretend, but unless you like or amnesic, it's going to be very challenging to start a romantic relationship over again. You cannot start a parent-child relationship over again. It does not give you that opportunity. I don't care how good you are at forgiving, that relationship never gets to start anew. Your professional relationship at work, even.
I would say I wouldn't say never. I don't think there's any relationship that can't renew. It's just how hard do you want to work at it, right? Because some are just going to take more effort than others, right? And so it's like any, funny enough, I got this from my ex. They would always say at work, they would always say like any relationship is salvageable. How hard are you willing to work for it?
So salvageable is different from new.
Okay, yeah,
right?
Sure.
So
yeah,
this is the unique magic of a friendship. People will say this is a very common trope in friendship. I hadn't seen them for years, but it was like we'd never been apart for a day. We just picked right back up where we left off.
I think I've said that in half my interviews. Yeah.
Like it's like that is a unique blessing of friendship, is that you can do that, and I don't think that there are many other relationships where it works like that. Like you could get back together with your ex, you could forgive an abusive parent, but the relationship dynamic is almost forever altered. It's very
Sure.
hard to start anew. And I just think it's one of the most powerful things that make friendship unique, right? Is that you can begin again. And it's easier, I suppose, to begin again than any other.
I mean, I would push back on that, because if we're looking at it from the context of our friendship, you know, especially after the last break that we had a couple of years ago, you know, like, I was really cautious, and I was really, really held back when we reconnected. And I was watching, you know, because I knew who you'd been, I knew who I'd been, I knew, you know, my perspective of what happened, and I knew how hurt I'd been, right? And so when we reconnected, I was terrified, you know, because I didn't yet have the evidence of who you were now, and so I was watching real close, you know. I just wasn't announcing it, right? And so, you know, like, because especially coming from the context of this show and the exploration that I've been doing the last couple of years, you know, I see friendship as a much deeper intimacy than I think a lot of the conversation gives it. And there's both a deeper and higher levels of intimacy involved, you know. I think it really might depend on, like, what kind of importance you put on, like, sexual intimacy versus, like, emotional intimacy or things like that, you know. But in rebuilding our friendship, I was really cautious, and I was really mindful of it, and I was watching behaviors more than anything, you know. Because you would say stuff, and I'd be like, okay, I agree with that, I can get behind that, but then, like, what are you gonna do next week, you know? And slowly over the last 2 years, you know, I've seen the behavior that has changed, and I've seen the way you show up as a person versus what you say you're gonna do, and that's what's rebuilt the trust for me, you know, and that's what rebuilt the intimacy for me. So that's why I really do believe that, like, I think I hear what you're saying about, like, the uniqueness of the ability to start over in friendship in some capacity does feel easier to do, just because of the very nature of it, you know, and the sort of the type of connection that comes out of friendship. At the same time, too, though, I think that it is just as much a mirror of any other type of relationship. I wouldn't differentiate it, you know?
Well, okay. Well, I mean, that's interesting. You know, and the sort of the way that I see it is obviously quite different. And when I think about what, you know, what allowed us to be friends, and then further what kind of maybe put a challenge into that relationship to be friends was had a lot to do with our partners. It had a lot to do with other people. It had a lot to do with other pressures.
I was going to ask if you wanted to, how specific did you want to get? I'd be kind of curious about, like, your perspective on things, but,
well,
like, I don't know.
Right? I'm deadly curious now, because I feel like such a villain in your life in this, where you're watching me, because I was never watching you. You know, like, the way that it worked for me was, and I had to go scrolling to some, you know, 6-7-year-old message to kind of, like, see what exactly had happened. I remember, you know, a tension coming up. I still really loved you. I still really liked being your friend, but there was something that had started to rise up that was, I felt, related to, you know, my harshness, or sort of my approach. But I can remember, like, a moment when, like, I just really wanted to continue to show up for you. Like, and I'm going to give you a few examples of what it felt like for me when our relationship started to slip away. The first thing that happened was I didn't get invited to your wedding. So or maybe I could go back. No, I want to kind of start around there. So I didn't get invited to your wedding
That's already not true, but
at the beginning.
yeah. Okay.
Well, there's context around this too.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I subbed in.
Oh, you're meaning about being in the wedding party, you mean?
I mean the wedding at all. No, what it was you didn't invite my wife. You didn't invite my ex-wife.
Well, you were married, yeah. But sorry, I don't mean to be argumentative. I'm just trying to
You
be
didn't invite my fiance.
Yeah, yeah.
My ex-fiance.
Yeah.
My future ex-wife.
Sorry, I don't mean to immediately jump to defensiveness.
No, but
That's
okay,
not,
like
yeah.
so semantics aside, here's what I remember.
Yeah.
I always loved you. You know, like in university and in the way that we would work together. And I remember we even had a blog together because, you know, you really inspired me as a writer. And I wanted to challenge myself to keep up to your pace. I couldn't do it, but we did write some beautiful stuff together.
Twin Cowards.
Yeah, the Twin Cowards.
Yeah.
But then I remember that there was this friction that came out of this really unique interplay between people. Was that I had introduced you to your ex-partner, who then your own future ex-wife. This will be impossible for anyone to follow along to without like a family tree or something. But anyway, what ended up happening was there was friction between your ex-wife and the fact that I was such good friends with your last partner. Let's put it in that sort of simple terms. And that sort of started to ask you to decide between me and her over little things, over micro things, over things that we maybe didn't even notice at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember, like, I really wanted to celebrate you. I remember I completely hijacked your bachelor party because I didn't feel like it was you enough, and I wanted to contribute, but I felt like it was slipping away. But I still felt like, you know, that you were one of my best friends, even though, like, I could tell there was so much more sensitivity brewing between us, that there was something going on in the background. And I remember that bachelor party as being both, like, me showing you that, like, I really loved you and that I thought that I knew how to please you. But there were some comments that you made about, like, my aggression or some of my language and things where I could see that, like, there was something underneath all of this that was continuing to pull us apart.
Yeah.
Then you didn't invite my ex to the wedding or put me in the wedding party, which was fine, whatever. But then, you know, our good friend had his own slip up, and then I got room, and you did invite me. And, like, what I would want to hope that you saw in that was, like, I went from being hurt to accepting it as soon as I could and being like, yeah, I will show up for you. I will do this thing for you. And what I didn't see at the time was that it was also really hard for you because of the conflict that you were having with your ex, right? Like, that I didn't get that, like, you were putting your neck out. I felt like you were fucking selling me short, and I was disappointed. I was like, man, I love this guy. I keep wanting to show up for him, but it's just something's not happening. Something's not working right.
Yeah.
And that it kind of, like, basically after your wedding was sort of the end of our friendship for that era, I suppose. And then we tried to kind of stay in touch. I tried to invite you to my wedding. You kept pushing it off. I was me, and I was like, James, you need to come to this. You're my oldest best friend. Like, you know both of us. It would mean so much. And you you really took that poorly. You really felt like I was bullying you into, and I would have, like, half Nelsoned you into coming to my wedding and being my friend. Like, if I could have bullied you, I would have.
Yeah.
You know, I would have WWE'd you back into my life. I would have done it. But, like, this like thing happened where you had to pick between love and this person and what you felt was right, and like there was nothing I could say or do to change any of that. And I remember, the last few messages that I wrote you, you responded to me incredibly hostile.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I have done something. I can't put my finger on exactly what I did to hurt James, but I've done something where his guard is up. His guard is up against me, and I'm pretty, I just couldn't tell. I couldn't tell what had happened. I knew that I was like, okay, I'm probably digging into things where he doesn't want me to dig, or something is going on. This is perpetual with friendships in my life. People slide away from me. Like, maybe this is just the natural order of things. But I remember, like, I really fought for it. Yeah. And you didn't come to the wedding, and it was kind of like the end of things. And then I remember I wrote you, and I was just like, I love you. I'm rooting for you. Like, my door's open. Not knowing what I had done wrong to be able to, like, ask for your forgiveness or anything like that, but just knowing that, like, this can't be the end for this relationship.
Yeah.
That, like, there's got to be this season's got to come back around at some point. Like, I'm not sure, but I wanted to make sure that the last thing I said to you was positive. That I wanted you to know that I still loved you and that I was still thinking positively about you. And I want actually everyone to know that. Like, that if we haven't talked in years, whenever you come up in my mind, I think a good thought about you. Like, I think that that's just the most important thing that you can do. I want the best for everyone, even if it means that I don't get to be a part of it. Because I think that life is scary and beautiful, and it deserves to be the best it can be.
Yeah.
But that's sort of why I ask about second chances and why I ask about forgiveness is like when I came back to Canada and we were both at Ben's wedding, like I was stoked to see you, and there was like rumor and like there was like whispering and like, oh, James is here, and like, oh, is that going to be okay and whatever. And I was just like, yeah, it's fine by me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see this guy again. So, I feel like I've hurt you a lot of times. Like, when I think back upon, I can't pinpoint and say it was this time I did this thing.
Sure.
But I know that, like, that you've had to be patient with me and you've had to, like, determine, I don't know. I just it's always been a really interesting relationship to me because I just feel like somehow I'm like a schoolyard bully in your life, Like,
that's how you felt a lot of the time. Yeah.
Like, I just feel like that's sort of the persona that I have attached to this relationship, and it's like I never wanted to pin you down. I always wanted to lift you up. I always saw like a really incredible guy in you, and it always made me incredibly sad that I didn't have the means to maintain your friendship, and like I knew that you had like some serious grudges against me, and I was just like, I don't even fucking know what I did. And what I'll say back, just like, is just I never had any grudges against you. I always just like, even when things got weird, I always left my door open and space in my heart for you. And I'm really excited to, like, I think I remember once I wrote you blocked me on Instagram. Actually, I can remember in the depth of this last loss, I wrote you on friend list because your personal account was blocked. And I just was like, I feel like I'm the epitome of this friendless person. And like, if you want to like really end this friendship and like, then we should talk about it. Like,
Yeah.
and I think I even like, I pitched coming on your podcast when we very much weren't friends.
Yeah.
Just because I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know. That's a long ramble, but it's
No.
just something I thought I've been thinking about for a really long time.
Like, thank you. Thank you for being so honest, and thank you for being really open about it, because I really appreciate it. It really, I've been thinking a lot about, I just talked about it on this month's wrap-up episode, about this idea of like reframing and not letting what you think happened inform what did happen, and trying to just really look at facts and delete the narrative that your brain instinctually makes, and instead just look at what happened, and hearing the perspective you had on things. I really hate shifting the blame onto other people, because it was me participating in this stuff, like it was informed by my relationships, and at the same time too, I chose to behave how I chose to behave,
Oh yeah. And I'll just say the same thing is it's like accountability is key.
Yeah.
But no man is an island. There's so many things going on in your life, and sometimes you can be more accountable than others.
And it was like, it's like stirring up a bunch of stuff in me about like, just that relationship and that time in my life. And like, I was so fucking lost.
Mm-hmm.
I was so lost. And I was in a really, really bad relationship that I didn't even know how bad it was until it was over. And then I had the space to reflect and just see how fucking bad it really was, and how scared I was all the time, and how isolated I became because of it, and how much of my life I blew up in service of this relationship that then just destroyed me, and it's hard to like, there's this part of me that wants to hold them accountable. There's a part of me that wants to fucking shift the blame onto them. And at the same time too, because it's like, it was abused. I was abused for 8 years, like I was gaslighted, I was manipulated, and I was fucking psychologically torn down. And at the same time too, I participated, and I made choices. And I know that there's lots of talk of, when you're in an abusive relationship, how you behave isn't abuse, it's reactive, and these things. But it's like, it's hard not to feel responsible for it, and I you were such an integral part of the bachelor party. You made everything more fun. Most people didn't even want to be there. Like, you were the one who was like, "Fuck this, James is getting married." Like, you were amping it up, and it meant the world to me.
Well, I remember that I called a limo to the. I was like, "There's no limo at a bachelor party." Still a bachelor party without a limo. We booked a limo, and then I can't remember what we were planning on doing, but I looked up and there was some wrestling happening.
Yeah.
In Cloverdale.
It was amazing.
So we went to wrestling
in Cloverdale. I still have the t-shirt, like.
And I proceeded to bet with you on every fight, but
Yes.
you understood wrestling and I didn't. So I lost every single bet because you were like, no, he's the heel.
Yeah.
No, this is what happens. You always go out on your back.
Yeah.
All this stuff I didn't know. And I kept losing bet after bet
Yeah.
after bet. I was like, listen, I know it's scripted, but I know you haven't read the script. So how come I can't get one of these right?
Because that's how it works, and that's how good wrestling works, is that what's going to happen, but it's about how you're going to get there, right? That's the most fun of it. Remember that? You remember the match where they did the slow motion fight?
Yeah.
And they were like, watch this. And then he did the like dick flip. He like grabbed his dick and he made him flip. It's fucking incredible, like.
It was a really good moment there.
Yeah.
It was super fun.
But coming back, I so much of what I took out on you was me transferring other pain that I was in. And I was holding you accountable for a pain that you were not responsible for. And I was projecting a lot of my insecurities, and I was projecting a lot of my issues onto you, and and that's not to erase everything, because like I do still hold on. Like, I don't believe in tough love, right? Like, I'm not somebody who responds well to bullying. Bullying shuts me down, and so like sarcasm I don't understand because I am autistic, and so I'm like, oh, you're just being mean to me, and even like motivational, like, you're better than like, that just shuts me down, but I also recognize that is a part of who you are, I just wasn't in a place then to be able to hear that, because I had so much else agonizing that I was like, I just need my friend, I just need my friend to tell me that he loves me, and that's enough, and I wasn't getting that, and so I was like, oh, I guess from my side, I was like, well, we're 2 provinces away, I can't afford to fucking travel because I've just blown all, and so like,
well, and I didn't know that you were in pain, right? Is the other thing.
That's just
and
it.
So like, maybe I would have been softer or changed my approach. Or, and I certainly, I feel like I've matured a lot in the last 5-6 years to.
I think you have
to allow for more softness and more, a different approach. And I still am my kind of same old self, but I try to bring more to the. I try to have more facets to my diamond than I used to, right? And so, the troubling thing was, you could blame me because I was a bit of an influence on your life, and you followed me down a path of horrible marriage and divorce.
Technically, I got married first, so I finally got one ahead.
Right. But that didn't pan out very well for
so
either
thanks,
of
Scott.
us.
Yeah.
But it's you can offload the blame, and you can talk about projection, and you could talk about all these things. And I think in my heart, I just always knew like that we never had a breaking point.
No,
right?
never.
Like even when we were broken up, it was like, this isn't ours.
Yeah.
Like this is something else that's happening in the world, and like it's really hard to choose courage, and that's like a big thing that I think about all the time in my life now. Is like, it's always a good day to choose courage. It's the hardest thing to do, is to get out of the things that are hurting you and remove yourself from victimhood, take accountability, and have courage. Because I was like you, I was also very stuck in a thing where I didn't feel like I could be myself anymore.
Exactly.
And I also chose my ex's friends over my own friends because I was under the impression that my own friends weren't good enough, that I needed to, that like if I wanted to have a community, it was going to be my partner's community, that my partner wasn't going to go full swing into my community. Like It just wasn't going to happen. And so, and rightly or wrongly, I may never speak to her again to be able to ask those questions, and the answer I get may be false anyway, where I just, it's hard to know. But, and I think it's important that I take my own accountability in that as well. It's like, everything that you're talking about projecting or about being in this challenge, and like everyone can relate to this. Everyone who's had a partner, or who's had a friend, we're talking about friendship here. You have a friend who gets into a romantic relationship that they should not be in. And you're like, you shouldn't do that.
But you can't live their life, you know?
And they're not going to listen to you anyway. It's just like, let's go back to the very beginning. When my dad got throat cancer, and I was like, maybe that relationship you have with the cigarette's a bad relationship. And he was like, don't ask me to be a different person. Was it the words that he said to me? And like that same thing is like when you're in a relationship and you're like, this person might not be the best person for you. They might not love you like I can love you. And like no one's ever in the history of the world received that message.
Are we supposed to just, like, we've never kissed, Scott? Like, are we supposed to just...
We have kissed.
Have we?
On stage. I believe we have kissed
that doesn't
on stage.
Count. That doesn't count.
At Atomic Vaudeville.
No, I just think we were supposed to kiss 20 years ago and we missed our chance.
I feel like we did kiss 20 years ago, and I have a photo of it.
Stage doesn't count. Atomic Vaudeville doesn't count, But, I don't mean to hurry us along. I'm
No,
this-
we should carry on to the next thing. I just if I could conclude
yeah.
on that.
I had one other thing I wanted to say, but I want you to.
Okay,
yeah.
so my conclusion for that whole question of second chances and forgiveness, and I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful
Same.
that, like, I have a heart that wants to open up again, and that you do too,
Yeah.
and that we were able to recapture a really important friendship, you know, that has history. You know, one thing I'm just going to tell you that is, like, super important to me is, as time goes by, only certain people can really know you.
Exactly.
Because only certain people can know your history, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you weren't in my life, and after I had gotten divorced, there was no one left in my life who knew my sister, who knew my father, and who knew me, in the context of having those people and losing those people, and not having those people, and so I had lost a part of myself when I lost you, because I lost the only person left who knew me that way, right? And so I almost couldn't relate to it anymore, because I didn't have a lens for anyone to see that. And, like, that's not fair to my brother, but, like, in the context of friendship, those people, if you can hold on to those people, they can help you out of the darkest times, and they can see you for the brightest star when you're not even burning, and that just means the world.
Yeah.
And so I'm really grateful to have, you know, someone who's known me since I was an ignorant little boy.
Yeah.
You know,
When you were in that truck driving commercial.
that's right.
Dad. It's the very first thing we ever talked about. I was like, I saw you on TV, and you're like, yeah, cool, thanks.
Yeah. See,
fuck.
not a lot of people know that about me.
Yep.
So
I'm gonna have to find that link and add it somewhere. We're gonna have to share that.
it's there somewhere.
It's
deep in
incredible.
the standard definition internet before 720p.
It's incredible. You know, I wanted to circle back to something, because you were saying you were sort of I don't know if you used the word confused, but you were wondering about, you know, my caution, and I think it's even in that moment it was my realization that I was still projecting, because I was not taking ownership of myself, and so I was still putting it on you of, like, I have to be cautious around this person, and I you know, I've been hurt by this person, so I have to be careful, and what it really boils down to was I was watching both of us. I was watching how I was showing up too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, you know, but then we did have that, you know, you showed up, you said hi, we hugged, and we were chatting again, you know, and it was an instant forgiveness, because it was like, oh yeah, there you are. You know what I mean? Like, and so it all that tension and all that built up stuff, like, yeah, sure. I mean, I love that we're talking about this now, and you know, we could talk about it at the same time too. It's like it felt like water on the bridge, because I'm in the exact same boat of, like, I don't actually have anyone else in my life who, you know, who has the same history, and I'm always looking for those kinds of friends, and it's like, oh yeah, I've fucking got it. I just have to actually nurture this connection.
Yeah.
It's you know, and that's something that really comes down to our friendship, and it's something that, you know, I talk a lot about on the show, and I explore a lot just in my own meditations, is the thought of, like, you know, friendship isn't inherent, you know, like, it's still in the same way that, like, love is a verb, so is friendship, you know, like, you still have to work for it. You can't just, like, not do it and not show up and not communicate and then say, well, where are my friends, you know, right? And that's why so many of my connections have petered off, because we both, you know, like, one of us has tried, the other hasn't, or neither of us has tried, or whatever it might be, you know, and especially in our reconnection, I've seen you try, you know, and I'm doing my best too, you know, so.
Well, I think I mean, you know, divorce helps. Certain things help you get a little bit more perspective on your life.
Really trauma bonds, you know.
Well, Yeah. But, one thing I was just sort of thinking is I was talking to you before the podcast started about how I'm dealing with like a lot of like father issue stuff right now where like I always wanted my dad to be proud of me. I never got that form of, acknowledgement from him, and it's always been really tough. And what this conversation has just sort of unlocked in me is I'm really proud of you, and I've got to watch you grow up, and I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of the person that you've become, the way that you continue to rise to the challenges of existence, the way that you always come back stronger, that you're even more artistic and autistic now that, that you've been, you've done so many beautiful things that I'm so proud of. And that's one of the powers of friendships, is that we can replace all of those little broken parts of the intimate parts of our lives, the little things we missed that maybe we didn't get from a mother or a father or a sibling. Friends can do all of that for us, and I get the opportunity to have known you your whole life, and
Yeah.
and to say that, like, I'm proud to know you, and I'm proud for you and what you've accomplished. And I think that's something we could all use a little bit more of, right? Is like, that's why having a community is special, so that people can watch you grow. And if you're too hard on your friends, or you're too hard on yourself, then you miss out on that. And that's a really special thing. And I think anyone who has a friend that they love and has got to see grow, and that they get to fill that special place, they say your friends are the family you get to choose, or there's some trope like that.
Yeah.
But I think it all ties in and is relevant here.
Oh, fuck, Scott. I was not ready for this. Okay. We're gonna. Thank you. I'm gonna go against every instinct, which is to just like make a joke and brush it off and give it back to you, and I'm just gonna just say thank you, because that meant a lot to me. And ooh, give me a sec. Okay, took a tiny little beat. You have you circled onto this at the very end of your answer, and I think again I'd like to just draw the spotlight to it, just so I could hear a little bit more concise thought of this idea of community that we've talked about, and this idea of friends are very much like the one-to-one, and then the community is sort of the expansion of that in a way. And we hear the word community bandied around for any number of reasons and any number of contexts. And I'm curious, internally for you, what exactly does community mean, and how do you sort of show up in community?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it means a couple of different things. And it's like concentric rings in the tree, right? At the center is yourself and your own foundation, and then there are the people who help you see yourself or help you be yourself. That immediate that friend circle, as it's called, where you've got people who are allowing you to drop your guard, be authentic, learn and grow. But then there's this there are certain times in your life where it's really like amplified, is like, then you got like, the whole fine arts department or the whole theater program. Okay,
Sure.
there's a wonderful sense of community where I am not able to say I am friends with everyone, but I can say that we are part of a mutual community, that there is a tie that binds there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that is a collective group of people who have a similar stroke of needs, desires, wants, outlooks, that allow themselves to, to really flourish as a group. So, you're interconnecting through mutual pastimes and other things. And that's like, so community can be really important in that it's a looser structure, but it's enough structure to allow for the pursuit and exchange of the ideas and values that help you be yourself, right? So it becomes a mirror of yourself, but it's a little bit more fun house. It's got variation to it. It's got variety to it. And that's so that next level of the structure is like, okay, I can express myself in my close circle of friends. And then this close circle of friends, we can express our joint feeling of being alive, or that mutual understanding of existence within our community that understands us and is willing to listen to us. And then from that community, we can feel supported enough to pursue and exchange our ideas with communities that don't reflect who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's an important thing that, like, I wish there was time to talk about is, I lost a friend, and she was like one of my best friends. But at a certain point, she told me, like, your opinions are all different than mine, so I don't think we can be friends anymore.
Right.
And I was like, oh, like, I like you for who you are, not for the things you think. Like, I'm okay with us having divergent opinions. And she wasn't, and that basically ended the whole friendship, is because we had some differing views. And I would discourage that if people can learn to accept that people can be wonderful even if they see the world differently than you, and if there's something, like, objectively wrong with what they're thinking, then they might need a friend. They actually might need someone, and if I was wrong and she could have held on and helped me see straight, or, like, given me other examples, then if it was really truly that wrong to her, we were friends, and the only way I'm going to change is through a friend,
modeling,
not through an enemy. Yeah.
Yep.
Through somebody showing me a different way. Right.
Yeah. Well, that's something. I mean, I teach this and I apply it to my life a lot, and because I learned it over the pandemic, is this idea of when you meet somebody. And, to use the example that I learned it on, it's like, you meet somebody on the political spectrum and they're way in the other route than you want them to be, right? You don't show up and shame them. You don't fight them, because nobody, that's the way to get them to dig deeper. That's the way for them to get rooted and combat and fight. Instead, what you do is you get curious and you talk to them. And the objective isn't to get them to go all the way from one to the other. The objective is just incrementally get them slightly further along, and just and to allow them to experience it within themselves, and allow them to come to whatever realization they need to for themselves, and not try to just browbeat them into compliance.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. And I what an idiot I would still be if I was holding on to all of the views of my youth.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Like, I need people to show me other ways of thinking, and that happens in real life. Like, we forget sometimes, because we think we have access to infinity through our little, devices in our pocket, but they're so heavily filter bubbled and algorithmically inclined that they actually are self-perpetuating your biases.
Yep.
They're designed to do it. And so how you break free from that is to actually be exposed to an unfiltered world. And that comes from people. That doesn't come from algorithms, right? It comes from actually being in the presence of someone, and that person being
challenging you.
Well, and also being loosening their guard. Like,
Yeah,
if they're
safe.
vulnerable,
Yeah.
if they feel safe and vulnerable and they're authentic and they're themselves, you're going to see an unfiltered something, which is more rare than ever to find. even your own friends from the group that you've cultivated that has all the same ideas, they're constantly self-filtering to be accepted into this group, because now that's their safety. So if you can find a variety of friends who have differing views from you, there's an immense amount of value to that. So if we go back to this concept of community, I think that there's the value of community is that it's a filtering out from yourself to being able to have enough mirrors so that you have support, so that you have motivation, so that you have mentorship, so that you have available lessons learned, so that you can see, mistakes and not make them. That's a really important part of having a community too, is to let other people fail so you don't have to make every single failure on your own, which I encourage you not to do. So there's that element of community. But then there's this like amazing thing that happens all the way down at the loose connection level, right? When you're sitting in a space that feels like home. Okay, we're all just walking each other home. Go back to the Ram Dass concept. When you feel like you're walking home with people, when you feel like you've got that community around you where home is bigger than your own four walls, that downregulates anxiety, that helps with your dopamine regulation, that helps flood you with oxytocin, that gives you all of the great boosts of being in love in an anti-fragile format, because it's a networked love, so it has more resiliency and stability. And then like right down at the end, like I remember this moment when the world was open, life was flowing, I was living in a community that was filled with people who lived and worked in the community, and the barista knew my order when I walked into the cafe in the morning, and it was ready for me by the time I paid. And when I would go to the pub after work, the bartender knew my drink, and she'd be pouring it when and like we weren't friends. I wasn't hanging out with them outside of this loose fabric that the society had created for these social encounters to happen. But when it was all working together, from my individual sense of self to my close ring of friends to the greater community, to just feeling like you're someone, or that you're nobody, but it's like it counts. I don't know, like that's I'm trying to tie it all into a nice bow, but the reality is when I think about community, that's how I think about it. I think about it as this place that's big enough to explore, to share, to learn, but to feel at home outside of your own walls. That place where you can feel that sense of, like I said, like down-regulated anxiety and emotional control and all that. I think I wanted to ask it as a personal question, and I saw your question is like, how can someone be a better friend to you? And I know you're going to probably finish with that question.
That's the wrap up, yeah.
But it left me thinking a similar thing, because I haven't always been a good friend to you, and I was very curious to know, like, when did you feel, if you ever have, that I was showing up for you, or that, like, what was a time, can you point to a time that made you feel like that I was a friend, or that, because we could talk all day about how I can improve, but I'm just trying to think of like what, if there was a moment, that you can pinpoint where it did feel like I was showing up.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple. I mean, we talked about the bachelor party. We can talk about some past ones, but also there's recent ones that come to mind. The way you showed up at my bachelor party was magic. The way you showed up at my wedding was magic. Like you got all the day of stuff handled in a way that I never could have. And I felt supported and I felt seen and I felt really validated. Just the way you were like, nope, this is an important day. It has to feel important, which is one of the sources of my own shame and grief around not being able to give that back to you on your day, and still carrying a lot of that myself,
Well, in the spirit of second chances and forgiveness,
yeah.
I may never wed again,
Right,
but
exactly.
the forgiveness is strong.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But more recently, it's been just over the last year, you've been away a lot of it, but we've always kept in touch when we needed to, and you've always been available when I've needed, and I've always tried to be available when you've needed. And when you're in town, it's always been about, like, when we hang out, we're really present, and that means a lot to me, and just seeing where you are in life and what you're exploring and what's just what's happening for you and how open and honest you've been. You're really modeling what you're talking about. You're modeling being curious, and you're modeling being safe, and you're modeling being present, and those are all qualities that I need in my life. You express yourself really openly, and then you listen really openly, and those things really matter to me. Coming out of what I'm coming out of, what I've been losing recently, and feeling so lost, and just like out to sea, and all the connections that in many facets, close friends of ours that I am not connected to anymore, let alone all the other world that I've lost, like, for you to have been as constant as you are, and which hasn't meant you're available every day. And that's not what's mattered. What's mattered is that you've shown up when you can. And that is exponentially more helpful for me than someone who, will say they're available and then not be, or someone who just, like, outright drops, someone who shows up saying, like, I have capacity today, that means so much more to me. I talk about it on the show all the time about, like, it's not about quantity, it's about quality, and it's about consistency. And if your consistency means only being able to talk once a month, that's still consistent. It's just if somebody overgives and then pulls away, like, that's the stuff that scares me, because I listen to people, I listen to what they say, and I hear them and I believe them, so if somebody tells me I love you and you're my friend and we're always going to be friends, and then when I reach out to them and they're gone, that fucking hurts. And it's not only does it hurt, it's scary,
Right?
because then it's like, well, what else was a lie? Whereas you are, you're not only do you express love and support, but you also express what you're capable of, which is exponentially more helpful for me,
Right.
So that's the stuff that I really value, and that's how I see you showing up, in not only with me, but that's how I see you showing up in the world. And it's I you said earlier how proud you are of me, and I've been thinking about, like, just how much that feeling is reciprocated, and just how impressed I am by the life you're living, and my internal narrative goes to these, like, well, I'm not doing this and you are, and I'm not doing this and you are, like, I
used to think that about you all the time.
Right?
It used to be, like, the hardest thing to have friends that were really talented and really, emotionally aware, and I used to just begrudge when you do something good, because it looked like it was too easy, and it was harder for me. I used to, like, we still did our thing and we worked off each other, and it didn't, but it's always it's something that I have certainly reframed in a later part of my life. Again, it's like a scarcity versus abundance
Exactly.
thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, if James is writing a good script, then I can't write a good script.
Yeah.
If James is making people laugh, I can't make people laugh.
Yeah.
You know.
But it's the thing, and this is what I've noticed in our the last couple of years in our reconnection is this idea that it's like from my perspective, what I've been seeing is like I have things to offer you, and you have things to offer me, and we have overlap in some areas, and then we have differences in other areas, and it's those gaps that the friendship thrives in. Like it's what I know about that I give to you, what you know about that you give to me, how we can prop each other up in the places that we I'm always hesitant to use words like lack and stuff because they bring such negative connotations, but it's like it's those spaces that I value you most, in that like you are capable of doing some things that I'm not, and so I watch what you do and I try my best to emulate that, and I try to reciprocate that, and I try to remove that competition and instead see it as like there's stuff you can do that I struggle with, and there's stuff I can do that you struggle with, and that's what being a friend is propping each other up in those moments of need.
Yeah, and I think for me, what I'm loving about this current iteration of our friendship is it's actually the most vulnerable version of our friendship.
100%.
Where we're both better listeners, and we're both, I'm not going to say every time we get together it's like a confessional, but we're at this point in our lives where there's no harm in just being honest about where we're at, what we're going through, what feelings we're going through. We've been through enough of the same shit, and we've done it alone, and we've, like you were saying, like you kind of like project onto the other person when in fact, like, hey, that's an ally that I'm pushing away right now.
Exactly.
And I feel like that's been a positive change. I've worked on being a better listener, naturally great speaker. Listener needed a little bit more work, and it's
never needed to learn charisma. That was when you were doing the character build, you were just whoever built you just maxed out the charisma.
Yeah, left very little in height and ears.
Strength is lacking.
Not an elf. Not an elf. But it is something that I found has been a really like wonderful part about this friendship is like, I think and when you're younger and you're like trying to be a man, you gotta look strong, and I think we're like both so happily broken.
Yeah, exactly.
At this point that we're like, we're both like appreciate those same things. Yeah, this is our first time. We're just walking each other home. It's nice to be able to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, right to the beginning of what I was saying, authenticity, a place where you can be yourself and not be in your chameleon skin or wear one of your many masks or personas or however you want to look at it, but where you can just be yourself in whatever moment you're in. And like, it's funny because it's like, I remember we like met up for like a little comedy show, and I was burnt out. You were sober. It was like 90 minutes or something.
Yeah.
We connected, and I was like, all right, I'm at capacity. You're like, I'm at capacity going home too. And that was like probably not a place we could have gotten to before. We would have expected more out of each other, or would have felt some sort of like judgment over like, oh,
why are you being a dick?
James doesn't want to hang out with me because I'm drinking and he's not, or Scott doesn't want to hang out with me because I'm sober, and he, like we would have come up with a narrative, and like we talked a little bit about narratives, and I think they can be very dangerous, because we can run away so quickly from the reality of a moment, because we didn't clear it with each other, we can come up with our own scenario there, but. We were both like, yeah, this is what I have capacity for, and we were fine with that, and I think that that's a great place to be. It's
Yeah.
nice to have friends where you can just be like, because that was always a problem with my relationships, was like when I didn't have full capacity, I was expected to.
Yes, exactly.
And that's a really nice thing about a friendship is it's like, hey,
Show up as you
I
are.
got 20% today if
Yeah.
you still want to hang out. Or when you don't
Yeah.
too, and like you can call it off.
You can just
without-
say I don't have capacity, and that's good.
That's another huge
Yeah.
huge thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny you keep on bringing up the Ram Dass. Like I made these little things. This is another Ram Dass thing. I can do nothing for you, but work on myself, and you can do nothing for me but work on yourself, and that's it. And I really believe in that. That it's like there's nothing I can expect from you. The only thing I can give you is I'm just going to keep on working on myself. And hope that you do the same. But that's up to you, right?
Yeah, but there's a little hidden magic right in that.
Oh, yeah.
Which is and I 100% agree, and we've talked around this theme lots about ultimately you're responsible for yourself and no one can change you, and you have to own your own life and existence, and we can't project onto other people. We can't blame our exes or our old partners or our fathers or whoever feels like they deserve a decent amount of the blame for the situation. But the magic in that I can do nothing for you but work on myself, you can do nothing for me but work on yourself, is not homework.
Mm-hmm.
That is not something you go off into the corner and do on your own.
You do it in connection.
You do it in connection with
Yeah.
other people, and there is a light that you can bring to someone else's life. My mom has this phrase that like just really, really sticks with me. And she says like the problem with the world is that there's a love starvation. And so if you have extra love to give, it can profoundly change someone's life. Like just a simple compliment, a comment, a check-in, whatever. Like we're missing love. Everyone's there's plenty of trauma. We got an excess of many, many things, but love is something that, is infinitely abundant, but somehow in short supply. And so it's something that, like, when you talk about those phrases, I think the important part is, like, yeah, you have to do your own work. But man, is life hard to do without someone next to you.
Exactly.
And so the more people you can be, weaving your tapestry next to and then interweaving it together, creating that social fabric and that emotional fabric that can help, lift you up, that's a huge bonus to have in this world.
Yeah.
So, that's why Ram Dass really he makes a lot of sense to me. That we're both just walking each other home is the same thing. We're both going our own way. We're both going to our home. We both have our own path to go on, but we can do it together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very last question, just the wrap up. Before we launch into it, though, I'm floored. I'm absolutely floored. Like I went into this expecting one thing and getting something so profoundly deeper, and I'm just filled with, like, it's shutting me down, like, because it's like I'm having like autistic dysregulation over like just how overwhelmed with the emotions I am, and so I'm worried that I'm coming across sounding really monotone. That means I'm feeling a lot of things, but I just find myself feeling just flooded with love and love for you and gratitude for this friendship and gratitude for just who you are. And in recent weeks I've been really exploring this idea that I'm actually really mindfully and actively pulling away from telling people I love them. I'm becoming much more mindful of who I use such a powerful word with, and I'm trying to model outwardly something that has really hurt me inwardly, which is people being really careless with their love and expressing love to me and then not demonstrating it. And so I've been really mindfully pulling back from doing that. And you are someone that I know I don't have to be cautious around that with. And so I just, like, from the bottom of my heart, I love you so goddamn much, and I'm just so grateful to be your friend, and I'm so grateful to have you in my life.
Oh, I love you too, James. I really appreciate you saying that, and it's interesting what you say. You know, I have in the past been accused of love bombing. You know, getting my open heart up in everyone's face and saying sweet things, and then there being attachment connected to it. And then, you know, I understand where you're coming from, you know, and I'm not sure that if you can find a way to keep that heart open and keep sharing love with the world, I think it's really important. I think on the opposite, for people who have hurts around abandonment and around love, that we have to be cautious and not, you know, create those triggers back in them. But when it feels good, you should do it.
Yeah.
You should do it when you can, because it matters, you know. I try to love every single person. It's kind of like a Dalai Lama puts George Bush Sr. on his altar, and people are like, "Oh, what's this about?" And he's like, "You know, I love even my enemy, or even the person who sees the most differently from me." You know, we can't all be Dalai Lama all the time, but
I think for me it's about expressing it, right? I think there's a way to feel it.
Yeah.
And but even that is still in a way a sort of a selfish act, right? Because it's like I'm gonna feel it for myself because it feels good to feel love, but I'm not necessarily gonna say it to everyone because I'm not always gonna be able to act it, you know. And so at least where I am right now, and
Sure.
that's you know, like, that's just where I am because of what I'm coming out of. And so it's like I'm burned, you know what I mean, and I'm healing, and so I am cautious, but that doesn't mean I always will be. I'm not always going to be hurt, you know what I mean? So,
and like love can be light as a feather. Love can be
exactly.
Love can be a smile, right? Like love doesn't have to be a commitment to someone where then when they pull back, it's, oh, you never loved me, or anything like that. I think there's many formats to it, and at the base level, it's like if you can just see someone and you can help them see themselves, and if you can offer that level of love, that's pretty special.
The wrap-up question, I always love to leave listeners on a actionable step that they can try taking. So what do you think is one thing people could try doing to be a better friend this week, whether it's to themselves or to their community?
This week, as we head into spring, you know what I would recommend doing this week? If you're anywhere where flowers bloom, pick a flower and give it to a friend. That's going to be my weekly recommendation. It's one of my favorite things to do. It doesn't cost you anything. Everyone loves flowers. That might be a good way to be a friend, is just to give your friends some flowers. You know, like I always say, tell them you love them. James says, be cautious about it. Tell them you LUV them if you're not ready.
Show your love. You know, show it.
You know, other ways like people could be a good friend. You know, I think for me, you know, when I think about what I need from my friends is, you know, if you've got capacity, send me a ping. You know, send that person you love even the simplest message, and find a way to show appreciation. When I am low, I need it from people. I need to feel appreciated in this life. And, you know, I'm not saying, hey, do my trauma work for me or anything like that, but I am recommending that if you want to be a good friend this week, I think the smaller the gesture, the better. I think to James's point, to your point about grand gestures and then failed follow-up, it doesn't need to be grand. It can be super, super simple. But when you're out there in the world, I think, I have this, everything has to be so long-winded with me, but I have this, I have this hockey chat group, and it's a safe space. If someone's feeling depressed, someone's friend kills themselves or parent gets sick or whatever, like everything has happened to this group of people in this chat. It's a place where they can go and they can say, hey, this is happening to me right now, and just have the rest of the team, the rest of the group say, hey, man, I feel you. I understand. I'm here for you if you need anything. And, I haven't been particularly reached out to after a message like that, but even knowing that it's there is really special. So if you've got capacity, put it out there. And if you need something, that's the other thing. You can be a better friend by being vulnerable and asking for help. I think maybe that's missing from a lot of the how do I be a better friend? How do I be stronger? How do I, it's actually like
ask for help.
Asking for help is actually telling someone you're having a hard time. Because they'll probably be like, oh, shit. Oh, I must mean something to this person that they're coming to me in this moment. It's not always about being the stronger person, And I think that that's important, is people forget and people think, oh, I always have to show up here, or to be a good friend is to be the person who carries the load. But, like, one amazing way to be a good friend is to teach your friends that you need help too.
Fuck, Scott. Jesus Christ. That says everything. That says everything. I feel like I'm
it's one of the best ways that you've been a friend to me in this version of our friendship is you'll be like, this is where I'm low right now. And I'll be like, hey, I could probably talk to you about that. I could probably, and then I feel so much more permission and safer to say, this is what I'm struggling with. Sometimes being the first person to open that layer of vulnerability, it can lift this huge weight off of both of you, because you're going to feel seen, you're going to feel connection, you're not going to feel so alone again, and then it's going to help you get ready for the next stick or stone that comes from being alive.
I mean, there it is. That really is it. I feel like I've hit brain load, because like I'm so like you just God, I wish I knew how to like circle back to this, because it's sending my brain into so many different directions of like who I feel like I want to reach out to and speak to, and also who I hope would trust me, and and just like you really encapsulated a lot of the questions that I've had for a really long time. And this is one of the things that I cherish about our friendship, is that you have this uncanny ability to listen to me and then distill it back in the most powerful, poetic way. And it really, it never fails to just like boggle my mind. So I'm just really grateful for that. Is there anywhere you would like listeners to find you? Do you have anything you want to plug? Is there anything you want to anywhere? Do you want to stay mysterious, or how do you want to play this?
Funnily enough, I am definitely in the mysterious part of my life right now.
Cool.
I have no public offerings to give. All my stuff is fairly private right now. If you know me, through James, or you found this some other way, all I want to say is I'm sorry. I love you. Thank you. Please forgive me.
And that's it. Thank you one more time to Scott for coming on the show. That was an absolute honor and just such a blast. I have just been crying just editing this episode, re-listening to it. I guess I hope that in listening to this, maybe it'll inspire you to reach out to a friend of yours, someone who maybe you haven't spoke to in a while, or just someone who means a lot to you, and maybe give them some kindness, like Scott did, because I have just been glowing ever since that interview, and it meant the absolute world to me. If you would like more friendless content, you know what I'm going to say. Sign up for the weekly Substack. You are going to get 5 recommendations for things to check out. These are going to be books, movies, music, comic books, articles from the internet, YouTube videos, all kinds of fun stuff. You're going to get a curated poem that I have enjoyed that week, as well as a playlist that I build every month. I am in the process of revamping and remodeling the newsletter slightly. I'm hoping to be launching that in May. I also am going to be launching a subscription service. This is looking like it's going to be more like June, but I am still looking for feedback. I have ideas for courses. There's going to be a book club. There's going to be all kinds of Discord meetings, stuff like that. But if you have ideas for things that you think would fit within the sort of friendless realm that you would like to see in this service, please let me know. You can contact me on Instagram or TikTok at friendlesspod, or you can email me at friendlesspod@gmail.com. But that's it for me, so I'm going to wrap this up this week. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to catch you back here for the next episode. But I'm not going to worry about that right now, and neither should you, because that is then, and this is now. So for now, I'll just say I love you, and I wish you well. Fun and safety, sweeties.